Hello everyone, welcome to our Equality, Diversity and Inclusion session, or EDI session. Unfortunately, the quantum technology field suffers from quite low diversity, and it's quite important we improve this. And as it's a careers event, we thought it would be a better place to have an EDI session, so we can discuss the issues and see how we can improve the situation. We will concentrate on gender imbalance today. We only have a limited amount of time, unfortunately. Of course, there are other topics which are important, and all the things we will discuss today will also apply to other diversity issues, but we'll concentrate on this one specifically. We will start the talk. We start with a talk by Professor Ruth Oulton. She is a professor in quantum optics at the University of Bristol and an EPSRC Quantum Technologies Fellow, and she leads internationally on gender issues in the area of nanoscale quantum photonics. And she has been invited, as a result of this, to present her work at international science policy conferences. And today she's here, giving a talk on challenges faced by women in quantum technology. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's start from the beginning. Okay. So, thank you for coming to listen to me talk about this issue of gender in the quantum technology sector in particular. I'm talking to you today because I've done quite a lot of work as a gender balance advisor of something called a cost action, which is a scientific networking community that focuses on specific topics. Ours was nanoscale quantum optics, and they run mainly scientific conferences, but what I did was run gender balance sessions within those scientific conferences because basically there was we needed to tackle it, and I'll explain a bit more about why I did it in that context. Right. So if you walk into most physics, even undergraduate lectures, but especially now in research, what you'll find is that the number of women is usually very low. We've got quite a lot of women here today, which is unusual. I'm not used to it. Normally I walk into a room and I can sometimes be the only woman, and that's been the case since I've been 16 and been doing my A-levels. There's been a lot of debate and questioning of why don't women come into these sciences like physics and engineering, and why don't they progress through the ranks? Okay, so what I did as part of this cost action was say, well, okay, actually there is a lot of research into this area, but I want to know how much do the scientists and the engineers themselves know about the causes and effects. Okay, so I ran a survey. I ran an initial survey and then I did a final survey to look at see if there are any changes. And I'm going to show you some of the results of the survey, not all of them, we don't have time. And I compared the answers, I'm going to compare the answers to what's known within the gender studies research. And then, if I have time, I'll talk a little bit about some actions that I took as a result of that survey. So when I took the survey, I asked several questions. The first question, the main question I would say almost, is question 1. Do women and men in my field have equal opportunities for career advancement? And the answer you find is quite clear difference. The pink is women, the blue is men. You can see there's a strong imbalance in men's and women's views. Now, I would say that the first big difficulty here is not who is right, but the fact that there's a difference in opinion. And that's already going to divide a community. Okay? The question is, why is there such a big difference in opinion? Why do women disagree with this statement generally and men agree? Well, I asked some more probing questions about exactly where this inequality in opportunities came from. And one of the things that's a real standout is this question. In my wider network, are men and women treated equally regardless of gender? Now, I'm not going to show you all the statistics of this, I'm just showing you the data for women in terms of seniority. And there's a really interesting and quite strong statement here. If you look at, say, Masters or a PhD and senior women, I mean tenured women people, sort of about 10 years into their career or so, there's a difference in opinion. But if you look at postdocs, none of them agree, or neither agree or disagree. They all disagree or strongly disagree. So there weren't very many postdoc women in that survey because of the low numbers, but all 9 of them disagree with that statement. And 3 of them disagree with it strongly. What they're telling you is very, very strong and clear. When I go to conferences, when I go to project meetings, I am not treated equally. Okay? I think that's a really strong message to get across, because a lot of the time we feel that there is, it's all to do with the number of women coming in, and it feels very nebulous. Actually, no, this is about the communities that we're making and how we treat each other as we network. Okay, that's something all of us can do something about. Right. So, you might say, well, who is right, who is wrong? How do we know? It's very difficult to prove. Well, actually, I would say there's a huge amount of literature on gender equality, in particular STEM subjects and in general, and I could pick out many, many examples. I haven't got time to do that today. I'm going to pick out just a couple of studies. One of these studies is when a fictitious CV was sent to lab managers and scientists, and basically they labelled one CV from student Jennifer and one from student John. And what they found was that the male student was evaluated in terms of competence and hireability consistently higher than the one with the female name. And interestingly, that happened not just with male evaluators, but with female evaluators as well. And this is the effect of something which is often called implicit bias or unconscious bias. And this comes because we all make millions of tiny assumptions every single day when we meet people about what that person does and what they are from unconscious things we've learned in the past. And it happens to us all. It's very difficult to get across. I also am aware that I have implicit biases. It's very difficult to completely counteract them. You just need to be aware that they're there. And I can go some way to actually counteracting them. Now, this is another example which really demonstrates how much of an effect this can have. This is quite an old study now, but there have been other studies to confirm this effect. This is a study of fellowships, for medical fellowships in Sweden, where what they did in this study was compare a blind metric based on the gave an impact score based on the citations of the people's papers, and compared it to the competence score given by the panel. Okay, what you'd expect is a nice straight line, hopefully approximately equal for men and women. And you can see for the men it is approximately a straight line, but what you see is, of course, the women have consistently lower scores, and actually between, apart from the very lowest and highest scores, there's actually little correlation between the competence score and the actual impact at all. Now, if you're looking at this, you say, okay, so if the gap here is quite big, but actually maybe this doesn't amount to very much. What it actually amounted to was a difference between this competence level here between 3 science papers, or about 20 standard journal papers. Now, if you're in science, you know that gets it. Most people don't even get 1 science paper, so to get 3, it shows that you have to be extraordinarily, outstandingly good as a woman to have a chance at getting one of these fellowships. And this study has been replicated across many different fellowship schemes. The effects weren't as strong in all cases, but consistently men get higher evaluations than women for almost every study that's been done. So this is a real effect. Okay, there are many, many more studies. I'm not going to go into them all, but women are less likely to have their papers accepted, they're less likely to be cited, they're less likely to be invited to conferences, and they're less likely to be hired, and they'll get paid less when they are hired. Okay, so the effect of this is that, and it's actually a well-known effect, is that as you look at the numbers of women in any particular STEM area, if you look at seniority, women drop off as seniority increases. This is a plot of numbers of men and women in all STEM subjects, going from undergraduate to professor, and you can see that even though across the board actually there's about 50-50 men and women, this drops off quite low till we get to professor. Now, I'm sorry, I can see that this light pink isn't very visible, but what you can see with the male one here is that between 2002 and 2010, the change is almost negligible. In the following 10 years, it hasn't changed much either. So you might say, well, maybe this is due to 20, 30 years ago, things were different, now things are changing. They're not. If we want to wait for parity, it's going to take us about 100 years. Okay, so this is a consistent problem, and it's still going on. And actually, this is not just in academia; it's across the board. So this is data from the McKinsey and Company study from 2016. Very good study, very good data in there, showing that in different technological sectors, the number of women going from entry level to C-suite, so basically CEO, etc., drops off quite significantly. Okay, so the effects of this implicit bias are quite well rooted. They're basically gets everywhere. Very difficult to get rid of. But the first step is just to be aware of it and not say that, okay, there's no problem. Okay. And now we're going to talk about one of the things that most people think is a problem for women in their careers, and that's being a parent. So I asked the question, do women in my field with young children or caring responsibilities have disadvantages in their career? And actually most people agree that that's the case. Women actually highlighted this as a particular disadvantage, so really this is the 36% strongly agree with that statement. Okay. Whether it's the same for men the opinion was actually divided here. Okay. Now I'm going to go on and look at some actual studies of this. So there's a very nice study that's looking at statistics from the entirety of the Spanish academia, very thorough study looking at all these kind of aspects. And what it found was that basically across the board, a man in all STEM subjects, a man with children is 4 times more likely to be promoted than a woman with children, given the same seniority, number of years, papers, etc. Okay. Why is that? Well, it's difficult to tell. Just look at those statistics, but there are some surprises. So maybe not a surprise is that looking at the number of female professors, 69% don't have children, but for the men, 63% of them do have children. Okay, so this is surprising. Why is there such a difference? And actually, the most surprising of all is that if you compare a man with children, he's more likely to be promoted to full professor than a man without children. Now that is surprising because you might think, well, hang on a minute. If you have children, it slows you down because you have to spend more time on childcare. You can't work such long hours. That doesn't seem to be the case here. Something else is going on. And actually, there's an interesting study which looked at attitudes towards mothers and fathers in the workplace. And again, it sent out a fictitious CV where one was indicated to be a mother, one was indicated to be a father, and they compared them to non-parents. And what they found was that mothers are assessed as being less competent than non-mothers and fathers. And so they needed, for example, a significantly higher score on a management exam to be hired. And also they're held to quite higher standards, so significantly fewer times of being allowed to be late than non-mothers or fathers. But fathers, it's completely different. They were considered to be significantly more committed to their job, whereas the mothers were considered to be less committed, and they were allowed to be late for work more. Okay, so people thought, oh, this is great. What they actually said in the study was that the attitude is that men with children are more well-rounded. They have the technical skills, and they have to also develop the social skills by having a child. Whereas, that's not necessarily true for mothers. They're held to completely different standards. I think that's a really interesting thing because it shows that, again, this is implicit bias, nothing to do with the time spent on caring for children. Okay, now this is, I think, almost my final statistic. I also looked at the prevalence of sexual harassment within the community. Because this isn't something most people mention when they think, okay, why don't women progress in their career. And actually, I think this could be one of the main reasons for this leaky pipeline. What I found was that, I won't go through all these statistics, but the main point is that by the time a woman becomes senior, i.e. has tenure or has a management position, a leadership position, sexual harassment is an almost universal experience. So 83% of the women reported that it had either happened to them or had happened to them and many other people that they knew. Okay. Now, the interesting thing is also that 70% of the senior men didn't know anybody at all that this had happened to. So this is a universal experience that women experience, and basically you can guarantee if you meet a senior woman, it's probably happened to her. And most of the senior men are completely unaware of it. So it's like there's two completely different communities and understanding here. Okay. I'm going to finish now by looking at what are the most effective interventions to actually do something about this. I think this is what we're trying to get to here. And when I asked, okay, what's the most, if you had to focus your efforts on one area, what would you look at? And I kind of gave the choice of like focusing on women, so improving their networking skills and giving them support, focusing on men, i.e. raising awareness and providing training. Focusing on outside, so undergraduates and policymakers of schools or nothing. And most respondents felt that we should focus on women, and the least popular option was to focus on men. Now, I just want to show you that maybe that's not the right approach. Actually, from this McKinsey study, what they found was that in companies, the companies which make most progress with their gender balance is when the CEOs take it very seriously and make it one of the top 3 priorities. And they monitor these statistics and they take statistics. Okay. One of the things that was the most effective was this, mentoring junior women. And it's interesting why that's the case. So the reason why that's the case is not because the junior women are receiving the mentoring, it's because men are then exposed to the difficulties that women are facing and they begin to understand the female situation a bit more. Okay. So, just to conclude, what have I learned from these studies and what can we learn from them? Well, first thing I want to say is that actually there is not enough information and data out there about all of this. I'm presenting on women because that's where the most data is. If you look at other protected characteristic groups, there isn't actually much out there. There is some, but not this level of detail. And I'm trying to work on getting more statistics for the Quantum Flagship, which is a big European-funded project. But I think the techniques to tackle this are basically to inform, to have discussions, and to encourage everybody in the community. So I think that to convince everybody that we need to do something, you need the facts and the data. I think you need to keep on asking women for their perspectives. Women's voices get lost very often. You need to make a space for women's voices, but also you need to include men's voices as well and allow an opportunity for a free discussion. People don't like it when their opinions are squashed, but you do need to make sure that that's managed when you lead discussions. I did a lot of leading of discussions on these issues. And you need to enable senior scientists and leaders to give them the skills to actually change things in their situation. And actually, you need to finally make sure that funders' policies are female friendly. There's a lot of institutional sexism as well that also needs tackling. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much for the talk. We'll now move directly into the panel discussion. The panel is chaired by Alex Morlitz. She's a PhD student in the Quantum Engineering Technology Labs and also in the Quantum Engineering CDT here in Bristol. And she works on speed-ups for the small and noisy quantum groups of the near future, so very much the stuff we're doing here. And she frequently does STEM outreach. I think kind of science is one of your favorite topics there. And also active EDI, especially LGBTQ plus topics.